Good afternoon, everyone. We're letting folks in. We'll get started here in a moment. Heather, do you have the presentation up or would you like me to share?
I have it up. Let
Great.
me let me see if I can share. I just need permission to share.
There you go.
Okay. Okay. I'll just pull it up because why not?
Yeah. All right, 202. Marcy and Jackie, is there anyone else that you think we should be waiting for before we jump into it?
We have a great group here in attendance. I say we just get started.
Great. Heather, I'll just kick it off for you and then you can take it away. Thanks all for joining this afternoon. So this is our third SAC meeting. The last time we met was back in June. So I guess I'm just already going through the agenda. So lots of work has been happening in the background. So we're hoping to just bring you all up to speed on what's been done, where we've been, who we've talked to, and then come back to you all with some further considerations based on what we heard from you at the last meeting, as well as what we've heard from our Planning Commission and City Council, which we will give you an update on as well. And you'll see that we'll carve out some time this meeting to discuss these two boundary options that are kind of a hybrid of the options that you asked us to recommend and move forward at the last SAC meeting in June, along with some implementation measures, so ways in which these boundaries would be implemented, and then also how the SAC might want to evaluate those two options. And then we'll talk a little bit about what happens next. So project next steps. I know, I guess, quick announcements. I know that there's maybe a handful of folks that need to drop off a little bit earlier today. So we're just going to run through this presentation, but then Heather will follow up with you. And if you want to just provide any comments or if you have anything you want to chat about, we're happy to follow up and capture that. So we recognize that not everyone can spend the whole time, but we hope that you can engage where and how you are able to. All right. Heather, do you want to take it away?
Yes, thanks, Anise. And just to add to that, Marcy's also your local contact too. So if there's something that you want to filter through her or you have easier access to her contact information, that's another great way to get a hold of us and to feed information into the project if you can't stay for the whole time today. So just to recap the project from where we are, like Anise said, we haven't seen you all as a group since June of this year. So just wanted to do a few quick reminders of what we're doing here and what's happened since we've seen you. Very basically, what is a town center designation? As a reminder, we're creating a designation of a Gladstone town center boundary. It is part of a requirement by the state to have a climate-friendly and equitable community area. And this will be an area that's walkable, has mixed-use development, and high-quality transportation options, including pedestrian, bicycle, transit, and then vehicle. So when we designate a town center, we have to keep in mind market factors. Is it really feasible that things can happen in this area to make a difference, to make this town center a reality? Are there displacement risks? And if so, how can we mitigate some of that? So we're hoping that this town center will help us establish the boundary and then also have some development code updates along with it that can really help support bringing this boundary to life as far as economic vitality, overall livability, and just making it the right place and the right size for Gladstone. As a reminder, the city has undertaken some work in the city's downtown core, which is along Portland Avenue. In 2017, the downtown revitalization plan was completed. And then in 2023, the city adopted development code updates for the area in the lower right corner in the dashed red. So about 4 blocks long along Portland Avenue, where we did have some code changes related that are pretty similar to the town center strategies that we might be talking about. This slide has a ton of words on it, but it was requested by a planning commissioner for a previous joint work session between Planning Commission and City Council. And really just what's the difference between the downtown revitalization plan, the downtown core overlay district, and then now a town center. And so really what happens is that downtown revitalization plan, it was really focused on Portland Avenue. It looked at it as a corridor. It gave strategies for how to do some streetscape improvements and maybe some ideas for how you might update the zoning to support a really livable Portland Avenue corridor. And then in 2023, those downtown core overlay standards were based on those recommendations for Portland Avenue. But again, we're really limited in scope to just that 4-block length along Portland Avenue and all the C2 zoning in there. So now the town center wants to take it a step further and wants to say, yep, Portland Avenue is a great area. It's a great place to increase our streetscape developments, to change, potentially change up some zoning and some other things to make it more removing barriers to developing both residential and high quality commercial opportunities in that area. But then also, like, should we look beyond there, and how much bang for our buck do we get by expanding this boundary? Like, does it make sense to leave it along Portland Avenue and just expand a little bit to include residential? Or does it make more sense to really focus on commercial properties and including some more of those toward McLaughlin and 82nd? So I'm getting a little ahead of myself there, but really it's what makes the most sense for Gladstone, and we get to really have a say in what the best fit is for our community. So quick project overview is to establish this boundary as well as the development code updates and other regulations that might go along with that. That'll allow us to comply with the Metro 2040 growth plan, which says cities like Gladstone shall have a town center. And it also lets us accomplish developing a climate-friendly area boundary so that that complies with state law. So we're getting to do all 3 of these projects as one, which is a lot of economy for the city. And then just finally with the project overview, again, we're determining the right geographic size and location of the town center. And then we're going to discuss some implementing land use measures. Could be development code things, could be administrative policies and other types of resources that we have that could help engage development into this area. As a reminder, and this might even be new information, we really focused on this at the City Council and Planning Commission work session and trying to make it really clear that we won't be able to mandate any off-street vehicle parking within the town center and within a 1/4 mile of that boundary. So just making it really clear that there could be some vehicle parking considerations with what boundary we choose. Again, this project was funded by the Oregon Department of Land Conservation Development through a grant to get this project finished. As far as process and schedule goes, we are down at the bottom where the red big oval is for SAC number 3 and number 4. When we started drafting this presentation to talk about which boundary we may ultimately choose, we realized that without thinking about what zoning and administrative regulations might accompany that boundary, it might be really hard to make a choice between the two or to have strong feelings one way or the other. So it made a lot of sense, and it worked in the scope to combine SAC number 3 and number 4 and talk about both a preferred boundary as well as what kind of zoning and regulatory changes we might make to support that. So we are there in the fall of 2024, heading into winter 24-25. We had our public workshop in August. We'll go through some of those results, and had a Planning Commission City Council briefing last month. So we're staying right on track with the project, and we'll talk about next steps toward the end, but we anticipate being right on track with this project. So we had that public meeting. Yes.
Oh, just a quick pause to see if anyone has any clarifying questions about project objectives, schedule, anything like that before we continue on. No? Okay. Well, we'll take questions as they come. Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
I appreciate that reminder. I start getting it going, so please interrupt me again when it's the right time to ask some questions. I'm used to giving staff reports, and Anais is used to guiding discussions, so we're a good match in that way. I'll just throw all the technical information at you, and she'll pause me when necessary and make sure we're all talking in the right way. So in August, we did host a public meeting where we invited anybody who was interested to come out and give us their thoughts on the town center process. We did have about 20 participants, which seemed there was some lively conversation. We also put out a survey online and got 7 respondents to that. So we asked people to give us feedback between the 2 boundaries that you as a group had put forward in June. One was basically Portland Avenue, just lightly expanded to the edges of the blocks on either side. And the other was the one that extended to McLaughlin Boulevard. Let me just see if I have those. I don't think we put those diagrams in there, so my apologies. I hope you can remember back to June when you as a group sent those forward. And then there was that third option that hooked toward 82nd Avenue, which you as a group didn't move forward, but there was some discussion at the public meeting about that. So the option 1, Portland Avenue, yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, is anybody from the SEC or that's on right now, was anybody at the public meeting or remember hearing about it or seeing it advertised? Okay,
Yes.
just curious. Oh yeah, look, Andrew,
Hi. Yep. I was there.
awesome.
Yeah,
Okay, go
so
ahead, Heather.
sure. At that meeting, we had little stickers that you could put to indicate your preference, whether you liked what you were seeing, whether you thought it was okay and headed in the right direction, but you had a few concerns, or whether you did not like the option. So option 1, which was the Portland expanded, had 17 total. Yeah, I like it, or I like it, but I have a few concerns about it. I think it could use some amendments. And just 2 people put their I don't like this sticker on this one. The comments we received about option 1, Portland Avenue expanded, were that it seems to be the most viable. It best represents our city center. It retains current zoning because it's all pretty much C2 along that corridor with R5 behind it. It's a well-contained area. It should be expanded to include Wetton Elementary. And so I'm guessing these are the folks who disliked that it seems too small. And then when we looked at Portland Avenue connecting to McLaughlin Boulevard, which again is where the city's high frequency transit is located, we had 12 folks who either liked or thought it was headed in the right direction, and 10 who were opposed to it, disliked this option. The people in favor said it seemed to be the most viable. That comment came on both, which was really interesting that we got the exact same comment for both boundaries, that there was more flexibility, but they'd like to see the whole on Portland Avenue filled, which is happening right now. So that's good. And that it can provide benefit to more households and provide more space for businesses and or multifamily living. And that they liked that it connected to businesses on Highway 99. Those who did not like it or thought it needed more work thought that parking was really bad, that it was too large of a scale, and that McLaughlin is not a town center, was a comment we received. So overall, respondents did prefer option 1, as we just spoke about. More liked it or thought it was heading in the right direction, and fewer disliked it. 2 respondents wrote in on Post-it notes that they would prefer to look east toward 82nd Drive for redevelopment potential. And I did have a couple of conversations with folks who lived up near Oatfield and thought that heading east in the city would help make them feel more connected. So that is the results. The survey also followed those same lines, and those comments were embedded in there as well. So same information was received at the meeting as in the survey. Boundary options. So after the public meeting that looked at the SAC recommended boundaries, we held a joint Planning Commission and City Council work session and discussed what we heard from the SAC and the public meeting. And the City Council and Planning Commission came up with a couple of revisions. So this boundary option 1 is basically the same as the original boundary option 1, but now you extend east and west 1 more block. And the idea there is to really include more of that R5 middle density residential property, so that you could really see some potentially increased density, potential changes in the types of housing that are available there on properties that are either vacant or redevelopable. So this option, in my mind, is really, both focus on Portland Avenue, but this one really increases the amount of residential capability you have within your town center. Boundary option 2, on the other hand, which is a little hard to see here, but it's an inverted T. And the idea there is that you get the Portland Avenue C2 zoning that's indicated along the middle, and then you expand both east and west. To the east over to 82nd Drive and to the west to McLaughlin Boulevard. And that really allows you that redevelopment of those C3 zoned properties, which is that lighter rosy colored red. On 82nd Drive in particular, our market study did show that that has the most redevelopment potential of any commercial areas that were studied. So some of the planning commissioners and city councilors really liked the idea that you could potentially encompass those areas and then the residential that's in between. One comment in particular said there's been a lot of investment, private investment along Arlington, so we could build on that if we were to really focus in this area and include these east and west bookends to our town center. Questions about either of the boundaries? Are they pretty clear with the purple line? I feel like this one shows up better than the T. Is everybody okay on? Okay, thanks, Glenn. Okay. Okay, so as far as implementation measures, when we really looked at what we would recommend the city examine for development code updates and administrative updates, they're pretty similar between these two. There's a little bit of variance, but we felt that for potential Gladstone municipal code updates, that within this town center boundary, one thing that you could do that would be fairly impactful is to expand that downtown core overlay to all of those properties along the C2. So as you'll recall, we only have about a 4-block stretch right now that is in that downtown core overlay. So we'd be really looking at about tripling or almost quadrupling the stretch of that, making it about 13 blocks long instead of 4. So really allowing those expanded development capabilities focused on mixed use, focused on reducing auto centric development, really pushing parking. We won't be mandating parking, but even if you wanted to provide parking, we're asking that it be put in the rear of the building in that downtown core overlay, and doing some other design standards that really de-emphasize the automobile and really encourage more of those other transportation connections. In the R5 zoning district, so of course there's a lot more R5 district in that option 1, we would recommend that you allow all housing types outright. Right now you could do single family detached and what we all call middle housing, which is duplex, triplex, quadplex, and townhouses and cottage clusters, but we'd also recommend looking at some sort of smaller size multi-household residential. This could either be, just allowing multi-residential household and whatever the lot would permit with the height and setback maximums, that's fine. Or you could look at doing something like allowing 5 to 8 units per lot. That's another way you could break that into 2 different recommendations, I guess, and consider those that way. Right now, the minimum lot size for multi-household is 2,500 square feet per unit. It's a little bit high to be able to get desired densities in the town center, so recommending that you consider a lower lot size per unit. That's a potential option. Also, reducing front and street side yard setbacks to 10 feet. Right now they're at 20 feet, and that's really to accommodate parking a car between the structure and the street. But if you are de-emphasizing putting the cars in there, maybe you can de-emphasize those larger setbacks and have a little bit more of the property available to build housing in that R5 zoning district. And then again, reducing minimum lot size to 2,500 square feet and a minimum side setback of 3 feet for single household detached. And that would just allow more homes to be constructed at more price points. The smaller lot that you have, the smaller home you can build, because the setbacks and the height will restrict the size of home you can build, but that does also have an impact on the cost of the home. So potential to consider there as well. And again, these are all things that could be considered with any of the boundaries. So just wanted to keep in mind that framework when talking about which boundary may be preferred. As far as boundary option 2 only, and again, the 2 is the upside down T, so just heading east and west in the southern part of the city. you could permit mixed use development outright in that C3 zone. So mixed use developments permitted outright in C2. And again, mixed use is where you combine maybe a commercial or office type use potentially on a first floor, and then have maybe residential units behind or above those commercial uses. So that's something you could add. That's currently not something permitted outright in the C3 zone, which does permit things like those automobile dealerships and other larger land users. I'm going to pause right there. That was a lot of information. Are there any questions about potential municipal code updates we could consider? I think Liz has a question.
Are you there? Sorry.
Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So, I was just concerned. Parking is like already an issue, and so with that 10-foot setback, people wouldn't really be able to park in their driveways if they have a sidewalk, right?
That's correct. That would not leave enough space for a typical car to be parked there.
We're adding more cars onto our streets where we already have limited parking.
Yes, but again, even if you require a 20-foot setback, you can't require that to be used for parking.
Okay, but I mean, it's completely eliminating the parking at this point, right?
I mean, it would depend on how the lot's designed. It would still be up to the market. If a person building a home decided that they needed a parking spot, they could still do that.
Okay, I think it's really important that I mean, the streets are already tight parking. I know right around Portland Avenue, and just like it's just going to get tighter and tighter. We got new businesses going in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
Kelly.
sharing my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Kelly Reed, DLCD. One thing I've seen, just a note on like the setbacks and the minimum lot sizes. I've seen the setbacks set to, 10 feet or even 5 feet potentially, for like the building. And then if there's a garage included, then that faces the street, then the garage setback is usually still 20 feet. So it doesn't mean that you have to build a garage. You can build you build new homes without garages facing the street, and your building can be closer, right? And then if you build a new home that does have a garage that faces the street, then that garage is set back 20 feet to allow for that space for a driveway. So that could be, a way to accomplish that and, still maintain that, the choices. And then I like the idea of the 1,500 square foot minimum lot size for multi-dwelling, because that size actually matches up with the minimum lot size or like the typical standard lot size for a townhome, which are already allowed in that zone, right, through the middle housing rules. So kind of aligning that townhome with that other type seems to make a lot of sense, because it's kind of already, that minimum is already established.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Glenn.
I think I heard you clarify, but I just want to make sure I'm tracking that the concept here for the setback reduction is just an opportunity to private property owners if they want to. They don't have to, under this idea, they wouldn't have to set their living room back, for example, 20 feet from the road right away. They could use more of their property for development than under the current standard. But if they wanted to, for example, have a driveway space on their property, they could still provide that, correct?
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Glenn, because I know in the C2 zoning district in Old Town, there are some maximum setbacks that are considered, and that is to pull those commercial uses up to that Portland Avenue frontage. So yes, you would not be having a maximum setback requirement there of any kind in the R5 zone. That wouldn't be what we're proposing here. Thank you. Lizzie, Andrew, and then back to Liz if there's more comment there.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me and I'm not all breaking up here. So
That's
just
great.
So, and thanks everybody for being here. So that reduced setback would also, another way to explain it would be like less landscaping requirement.
Well, I mean, not necessarily because we don't have landscaping requirements in R5, right? So when we review a home in the R5 district for a building permit, we don't have a minimum landscaping requirement. But you would still have setbacks required. But what people do in their setbacks, we don't require landscaping on a single residential detached right now. Does that make sense? You have a concerning
Yeah,
look.
I was just, so as it is now, you can build the entire lot then without any
Well, you
landscaping
still have
requirements? What am I missing?
setbacks. You still have setbacks, right? You can't build to your property lines, but we don't have a requirement that you landscape a certain part of your residential single lot.
Thank you, yes. And I
Yeah.
guess what landscape or would another word for that just be like green space in general or lawn or
Yeah, we just
the idea of like the more building we have, the less,
yes, although in R5 right now, if you came in with your R5 lot and said, I want to build this home and then I want to pave my front yard, we don't have a maximum lot coverage standard in Gladstone, so that would be permitted. And we do have a lot of those where someone wants like an RV pad or something that's pulled back, So I guess, yes, you still have setbacks, but we don't have a landscaping requirement right now in R5.
Okay, thank you.
Bryce.
Hey, so we were talking about, okay, so back to parking, but you were saying that it will encourage people to take another form of transit. Are we going to do anything to bring in more transit? Like, is this going to bring in more TriMet lines inherently? Are we going to get a light rail down? Like, what is going to be the alternative if people can't come to town? And like, we already have customers leaving our businesses because they can't find a place to park. I've had it as a comment. I've gotten it as a phone call before. And so I feel like you really brushed off Liz there with talking like, okay, it's not a requirement. I get that you can't have a requirement, but it feels like we're trying to do away with this and society's not making any reasonable means to accommodate this town center if it's really going to work out in the way it's going to work out.
Thanks for that comment, Bryson. It actually cues up my next slide, which is administrative actions. Kelly, do you want to make a comment before I jump into that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Just really quick. I mean, Bryce, the parking situation Bryce brings up is real, right? Like there are, if you're on street parking, I assume you're talking about on street parking, Bryce.
I don't care where the parking is.
Well, I mean, the fact that
and
people
here's the
have trouble
problem. Let me
finding
say something real quick because we've brought this up to the city before. This is not a right now issue. This has been an issue for years of us down there. And when we've brought it up, they say, "Oh, parking's expensive." And it's expensive to maintain. Well, we got to do something because we're just going to drive people out of town if they can't really make it. So sorry to cut you off, but
No, that's okay. I just I think I'm hearing that folks are having trouble finding an on-street parking space along Portland Avenue sometimes when they're trying to go to a business. And I don't think that the city currently does a lot of on-street parking management. So I just wanted to offer that DLCD just is finishing up our, actually, I think we did finish our parking management jumpstart guide for local governments, which is almost, I mean, it's a guide and a toolkit for cities to use to start to manage their on-street parking in a way that kind of makes turnover happen more quickly, so that you don't have somebody parking in a prime spot all day long and taking up that spot, so that it can make it available for customers. And so that I came from City of Oregon City, where that was always an issue, like downtown, right? They want that parking turnover. The business is really important for those business owners to see that parking turnover happen so that their customers, actually have options. And so that toolkit's available, and DLCD is offering help, not only the toolkit, but also, help in technical assistance and grants. So if the city was interested in hand, and I don't know if that's I don't see that on your
It's
on your
not.
list here,
I
Heather,
just
but
wrote it down. Thank you. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a good tool to go hand in hand with the changes to your parking rules, right? Where you can kind of have hourly restrictions on that on-street parking and do various other things to help make sure it's managed efficiently, so that, you know, people can actually find a place to park when they want to visit. That's all. Sorry, Heather.
No, that's great, Kelly. And I think the city of Gladstone has considered parking management along Portland Avenue. There's some signs down there that do say like parking district type things, but I don't think they've implemented the rules for that. But I think they're able to do so. And having a guide from the state to be able to help support that, I think is really helpful. And I added that we can be considering that as an administrative action as we're moving forward with whatever town center we choose. But I think to Bryce's point, engaging with TriMet is going to be a huge part of what we would recommend doing moving forward, because there are buses that go up and down McLaughlin. There are a couple of buses a day, right, that serve this area, but not enough to make it so that you could really focus investment and larger commercial opportunities here onto Portland Avenue or along Arlington. We really want to make sure that the city is considering TriMet, you know, what we can do to add. And I know they've had those conversations ongoing. So keeping that as part of a focus or a potential thing to pursue as part of this project is going to be really important, like Bryce mentioned. And then, yes, the parking management would be a great one to add here too, because we know that that's a large consideration for business owners. If a new business is coming in, having them be able to consider that. Anise?
Yeah, I was just gonna tag on that. And we could also look at some comprehensive plan policies around parking management. And I really like Kelly's idea of this parking management jumpstart guide, and maybe there is some guidelines that we can pull from that guide and codify potentially in our comp plan policies and or development code. And then I guess I was just gonna say something like you know, I think the parking issue is certainly real. And I think we sometimes forget that, you know, we're eliminating restrictions around parking, which does not mean that parking won't get built. I think that we will still be seeing, and you know, rightfully so, we will still be seeing most housing development in Gladstone going in with parking, simply because people want parking, and developers will be building the kind of homes and parking that people want. And so I think, you know, as long as that there is a desire for parking, we will certainly still see that being built. So just kind of clarifying that removing restrictions around parking does not say we have that no one can build parking. That will, yeah, it will likely happen regardless. So we can rely on that.
Andrew?
Thank you. And if the parking is interesting, I remember having these like deep conversations about parking before the rules changed, where there was like, now we can't really do much. So it's interesting to see. But I just do want to mention a couple of things that I thought were interesting that came up in the joint session with City Council and Planning Commission. I had an opportunity to be in that meeting. And one of the items that was brought up, great comments in that meeting, I thought was great. Commissioner Jacob Wees had, I think, some really interesting questions and insight, and that I'd like to kind of parrot here, if you will. But one of the questions he asked you, Heather, and I'm wondering if you have any more clarification for us. There'll be two ultimately, but first off, in designating this area, whether it's small or large, once this area is designated, are we immune to changes that the state will make perhaps to those areas? So let's say the state would say, you know, if you have a city center, then now you must do X, Y, and Z. We implement this area, we lose some control over what we can do there, obviously. But how much farther down the road can things change that will be out of our hands?
Yeah, and so just to clarify that question for everybody who didn't maybe watch that joint work session, it was having to do with once you designate your town center, now Gladstone has this place on a map that could have future ramifications, right? So if I think this Kelly too and Glenn, I'll ask you guys to weigh in if you have any thoughts that if Metro decided or DLCD decided or LCDC or the state legislature said, okay, everybody's town center now, you have to go 100 feet high for your maximum height or something like that. Those would apply here, I think, and that was our message at the joint work session too, is yes, if there was some change that said this must happen in town centers in the future, it would apply to this entire geographic boundary that we determine. And then I followed that with, but I haven't heard of anything like that or seen that on the horizon. So, having somebody here from the state and somebody here from Metro is great, and I should have prepped you guys for this, so sorry to put you on the spot, but if you have any thoughts to share on that. But yes, if we designate a town center area and someone who has authority over this type of land use says in a town center you must, then yes, we must.
That's a little alarming to me. From Commissioner Wees also had the observation that, and that's not necessarily his, like, I'm not saying he's like gung-ho about it, but something he had mentioned, so I figured to share because it really got me thinking. And in my mind, like, this is kind of a one size fits all kind of thing. It's like, hey, here's Gladstone, here you go, boom, bang, and you can, these are the rules that you play by, and we can have more commercial and all this. But one option that exists here is if we keep the city center, let's say, on the smaller side, having less of an impact on existing neighbors and other things that we can talk about, and I'd love to. That doesn't mean that there isn't that the city cannot make overlay, we cannot change code in other areas. We can still look at 82nd and make changes to the code. Am I correct? Like, this isn't we have to do it now. Sometimes I feel I'm always mindful of like high pressure sales pitches, and sometimes in these meetings I kind of start feeling like that. And I think it's a good time to take some pause and say, well, what are we really doing, and how far do we have to go? And is this the end all be all? And it's not. We can make changes that better fit Gladstone in the future. Am I correct in that observation?
Yes, Gladstone has the ability to set their zoning priorities that meet their community. But I will say that we do exist in a broader context. We're part of a region. And so we've been tasked with determining which area of our city can best support services and housing for people to gather. The services per the town center definition from Metro would serve tens of thousands of people, right? So you're really wanting to draw in the ability for people to come to this area, do their daily tasks, commute by whatever transportation works, and then potentially live nearby too. So Anise, I see your hand up, but I'd love for Kelly and Glenn to have a chance too, if they have any thoughts on this.
Sorry, I do not mean to have my hand up. I don't know how to
Oh,
lower it.
okay, no problem.
there we
So Kelly, you've unmuted.
Sure, I'll just respond by saying that DLCD doesn't have any plans to add more rules for town centers in Metro. The rule currently that was adopted in 2022 just says that boundaries need to be established for those town centers. And then, the parking rules that we've been talking about, the limit on parking mandates. But other than that, I mean, there are no current plans to add more requirements at the state level. Although, as you point out, like, it could happen, right? The rules get updated, as do codes, right? So that would be a public process, as rulemaking always is. But we don't have any plans.
Before you answer, Glenn, I see you just about unmuted and I cut you off. I was just going to say too, like, if you think of the flip side though, there are times when like a funding opportunity comes along and it's like anyone who's looking to, do a tree enhancement in their town center are able to apply for this special grant, or anybody who wants to do a parking management study, like we can fund that in your town center. So there might also be the flip side where there's opportunities and resources available to what you're doing within your town center. We've seen that before too. Glenn?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Kelly was sharing. But from the Metro standpoint, I don't think there's any reason to be alarmed about the possibility of some point down the road there being new requirements inside of these boundaries. Metro is simply requiring, because we are required to require by the state, that our jurisdictions adopt a boundary that is in the general location of the center as envisaged on the 2040 growth concept. But the commitment is that local governments get to choose the specific geographies that work best for them. And the Metro Council, when it adopts requirements for jurisdictions, it doesn't do so in a vacuum. It does so after an issue goes before the Metro Technical Advisory Committee, which is made up of representatives of local governments, and then to MPAC, the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, which is also made up of representatives of local governments. And then finally, the elected Metro Council will make some choice. So if at some point in the future, the Metro Council had an appetite to require certain types of things occur within these locally designated boundaries, that decision would come after extensive opportunities for local input. And right now, there's no discussion about having any requirements from Metro within these boundaries. The Metro Council is slated to take up the issue in December, and what's being recommended from MTAC and MPAC is just that local governments adopt boundaries with no other parameters beyond that.
Thanks, Glenn. And we do follow that. I think I get those emails with the agendas and the packet materials, and I always scan them on behalf of Gladstone. I believe Jackie does as well. So we're always ready to jump in when needed if those conversations affect things that are happening in Gladstone. Andrew, your hand is up. Do you have another follow-up, or are you having an unease issue?
I don't want to like take over the conversation here either, but I do have some things that
well, why don't we table just while we get through, like there's like 3 more slides and then there's like a discussion slide. So why don't we do that? Okay. So as far as like what Bryce queued up for us quite a while ago now is the administrative actions that we could consider when looking at either of these boundaries, in addition to any development code, or as Annie said, comp plan policy changes that we might make. First one being that we'd engage with TriMet and talk about service routes and frequency along Portland Avenue. And, you know, if the inverted T was selected, then what's happening in that east-west direction along Arlington potentially there. The second is to consider the redevelopment potential of the former library building and site in the context of this being a catalyst for other town center property improvements. You know, there's some opportunity there for the city to be a player in what happens with this downtown core area and how it redevelops. As Marcy presented, I think a couple of meetings ago, that we are part of a Main Street program, and that runs along Portland Avenue. So there are funding opportunities to support business and property owners along Portland Avenue, and that could be, you know, something that's considered for, you know, expanding in the future if that's something that works for the city. In the downtown revitalization plan, it did call for streetscape enhancements and utility and infrastructure upgrades along Portland Avenue. Once you do those types of capital improvements, it makes the cost of development much less expensive, or the cost of redevelopment. So if the city were to be taking the lead on developing some of those needed infrastructure enhancements, then it would be a much lower barrier to either redeveloping or developing a property in that area. And then the final bullet point there is bicycle route enhancements east and west along Arlington Avenue. Right now, there are sidewalks on both sides of Arlington, but if this is specific to the inverted T east-west, that if you were to make that your town center, you'd want to do some bicycle connectivity improvements as well. So evaluating these things. So here is the slide. So we got there a lot quicker than I thought we would. Commissioner Levante, but we'd like you all to have the chance to discuss and hear everybody's voice on which option you like the most, which gives you the most concern, and which we should recommend as a group to our City Council, Planning Commission, and City Council for moving forward. We're hoping there's some general consensus, but if not, we're hoping there's a majority, and then we can record any other views that we can also bring forward to those bodies. So here are the boundary options next to each other so that you have the ability to look at both of them when reviewing. And the next two slides are a larger version. So if you need us to zoom in on those, let us know. But boundary option 1 on the left is the Portland Avenue corridor expanded 2 blocks east and west. And boundary option 2 is the inverted T that includes more C3 property and extends from McLaughlin to 82nd Drive, basically around Arlington, and then goes up and down Portland Ave, and the C2 zoning adjacent to that. So we will open that up for discussion. And if anyone needs those prompts again, we're looking for what you like, what gives you concern, and if you think we should recommend one over the other.
I'll go.
Okay, Bryce.
Okay, so I do like the option 1 better than the option 2. But there's like parts of option 2 I like in that it kind of connects those 2 areas, but that's also not a center of town. Like that seems it seems way it's on a border of town, in fact, along the river there. And so that doesn't seem very town center-ish if that's our actual goal here. I think the whole thing's concerning. I'm not gonna lie. And I know others of us have concern about all these between the parking and 3-foot setbacks. It frankly just sounds like let's move into like little Portland and whatnot. And we like it here. Every one of us who is one of us townies here, we like it here. And I think you're hearing that from us. It would be great if we could just, I don't know what the exact option is. I'm going to say option 1 overall if we have to choose one of these 2. So it's far more town center-ish. But once again, the problem is it doesn't really go anywhere. It's kind of a stale road. So that's my opinion on it.
Thanks, Bryce. Caleb, and then West APL.
Yeah, I like Bryce's point about, if being central is important, I think that option 1 is definitely central. What I do like about option 2, though, is, when I think of areas that could be developed for better use for our actual neighbors and people who live here, the area up by the DMV is not currently something that's really utilized by a lot of our residents. And so both areas include kind of the Portland Avenue stretch here. But what I like about option 2 is just that it touches an area that I think is not pushing people out of their homes, but is also an area that could be used for businesses that are maybe much more utilized by the average person. And so, I don't know that I have a strong opinion that, I'm adamantly against or for either one of these, but I do think that area, if I were thinking of an area to develop for better use for our people, it would be up there by the DMV area. So for me, option 2 is a little better just for that reason.
Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name with the West APL.
Oh, is it me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Lisa. I don't know how to
Thank you.
change that. So
Oh, no, we should have. I know, Anise, you might be able to change it to Lisa. I know the administrator. There we go. Now
Okay.
you're Lisa. Thank you.
Excuse me. I agree with both Bryce and Caleb in a lot of ways. My first thought is I like option 2 the best. A lot of what Caleb said about, thank you.
Mhm.
The pink space over by the DMV it makes a lot of makes a lot of sense to me for development, and it does have a lot of parking over there. And there's that building, that large building. I don't know what the occupancy rate is of that building, and if they have room for other businesses there. But it does feel like there's space for parking, for businesses, for development. And I also like the idea of developing 82nd more. So that's kind of why I like option 2. If you go back to option 1, and then somebody in the chat asked, have you heard feedback from any property owners in the proposed boundaries? So I'm a property owner in the proposed boundary of option 1, and I don't love it because I'm a property owner. I don't know how it's going to affect our property or our home, or parking on our street is already kind of a pain in the butt because people park here because they can't find parking on Portland Avenue, which is fine unless they park here all day. And I've had people block my driveway and park here so that I can't put my trash out for trash day. So, I mean, there's problems with both issues. But as a property owner, I wanted to weigh in for boundary 1 as well. And I'm hoping that maybe with the old library, like, why can't they make that area downtown parking designation? Like, get rid of the building and make 20 more parking places that's just for downtown shopping. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Andrew?
Sure, thank you. And kind of to your point, I'm nervous and I feel uncomfortable about changing zones in a way where we've got people who purchase these residential properties, let's say on Arlington, and or anywhere in the city that we're proposing here to make these changes. You move into a residential neighborhood, and then all of a sudden you can have businesses next door. I know when you are trying to run a business out of your home, there's a whole thing hoops you've got to jump through. Letters go out to your neighbors. You want to make sure that that this little business that you have in your house really fits. It's my understanding that with these changes, it allows more commercial, but we would lose, the city. Sure, it's great to have businesses until a business you don't like pops up next door and is impacting your quality of life. I'm very much in the mindset that smaller is better here, and I agree with folks about 82nd. That would be awesome, and we can still do that. We don't have to make those changes now. We could make different, better changes in the future, perhaps, that fit that area in a better way, and we can still have some control on parking. And I'm not sure how many folks have really had a chance to look at the parking code, but I mean, for folks that are, elderly, maybe have difficulty getting around, for folks that have certain disabilities, maybe using wheelchairs, or you have a broken leg, handicap parking is a big issue with this whole thing. And I know, and it hasn't come up like at all. For these houses in these commercial areas. So my vote very much is for 1, even a smaller version of 1, personally. I'm concerned about impacting people's livelihood and homes that they've purchased in residential areas. And yeah, so if I had to vote, I'd vote for 1, knowing that the city can't make changes. We can do other cool things too, and have overlays and stuff. And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick comment before we go to Bob. Just
can I
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Can I say something? I have a patient I have to go
Oh,
see.
sure.
Okay.
Please.
So and I'll make it quick.
Sure.
And I'm on my phone, so it's not working as well as normal. So but anyway, I like 1. I'll say that. 2, to me, I think you spread out that bottom portion, and they're not going to have any connection. That end portion on 82nd, and McLaughlin, to me, is not going to have any more connection with Portland Avenue than it does now. Even if you add that in. And I think 82nd can develop on its own, so to speak. Yes, it'd be nice to conjoin it with this area, but I can't really see that happening just by changing this. So in essence, I like one. Like everyone else, I'm concerned about parking. I have a parking lot in front of my building, which I've had to ask numerous people to not use, and they've been very nice about that overall, but that could be a problem later on. And so I'm finished. So, and I'll be back in a few minutes. So, okay.
Thank you, Bob. I just wanted to comment on Andrew's comment about having different expectations about buying a residential property, and then now a business can operate next to you that couldn't have before. And that's not being proposed here or brought forward as far as changing R5 zoning to allow any kind of commercial uses. So it would only be those R5 properties that are already adjacent to a C2 property, or even a C3 if you're in that inverted T. Let me pull that up. There's a couple of properties there where there's R5, which is the yellow that's against the rose colored C3, but there are quite a few properties in option 1 where you are adjacent to C2 properties along Portland Avenue. So those properties, hopefully either they purchased knowing that they were next to a property that could develop commercially, but we're not proposing that the R5 zoning district could then have expanded commercial uses. So I just wanted to clarify that. Lisa and Andrew, are you guys, Lisa, do you have more to add? You have your hand up? Maybe not. Okay. Oh, okay. It can be tricky to get those hands down.
Sorry, my screen
No.
wasn't showing it. I don't
No
have any more.
worries. No worries. Okay, let's see. I think we haven't heard Liz, can I put you on the spot? Do you have thoughts about 1 and 2?
I don't have a strong opinion either way. I like
Okay.
the river included, but I agree that I don't necessarily think like 82nd or McLaughlin are part of downtown. So I'm good with whatever we say.
Okay, you cut out a little bit at the end, but I think what you were saying is you like the river connection, but not necessarily the full east-west extension, so you don't have a strong preference between the two.
I'm good. I'm good with whatever the group
Okay.
decides.
Okay. So I think that leaves us Mayor Milch and Glenn and Kelly, if anybody wants to weigh in.
I'm going to abstain from this. I think that this is just a great exercise for the community to decide for itself what they think works best. As far as Metro is concerned, either of these options would be great, and it's 2 very different options with pros and cons. So cool effort.
Mayor Milch, you look like you might.
Did you call on me?
Yes, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. And I'm on a bad connection. I'm going to take my video off just to help improve the connection.
Okay.
I thank you for clarifying that the designation of a town center doesn't necessarily change the zoning status from residential to business zone. The focus is on an area where we can improve the opportunity for less automobile dependency. And in that sense, close to the river where we have paths that don't coincide with streets, I would prefer, you talked about maybe improving Arlington for bicycle transportation. My personal preference would be, if we were to choose option 3, that Berkeley for bikes makes more sense to me than Arlington, because Arlington is still, unfortunately, kind of a cut through area for people that get off the freeway and come through the city. And as it is, people don't park in the street, they park on the parkway on Arlington because of the concern over the traffic there. But I think I like the idea of being able to include more business zoned areas in this town center, because to me, What creates a sense of less automobile dependency is more proximity to amenities that you need in your daily life. That includes a grocery store, you know, and some of the kinds of businesses we have on Portland Avenue, along with the possibility of new development that might offer additional things that are missing now. People say, oh, we want a bakery, we want a hardware store, we want things that we can get to where we don't have to get in our car and drive somewhere else. So for me, maximizing the potential for development to provide the amenities that people need is most important. The Portland Avenue area now is about half and half with business and residential, even though it's zoned for the possibility of both. But the other areas are primarily zoned business right now. They could convert from business to residential if we want to add more housing, but I don't see a lot of conversion in the other direction from residential to business.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mayor Milch. Kelly, did you have any comments from DLCD perspective?
Well, I'm with Glenn. I'm gonna abstain from, you know, going with one or the other. So I think it's a local, you know, local decision. But I will just say that I think it's important to consider the and this is really in the weeds, but the implications for transportation, like when development comes in, you do your traffic analysis and you figure out, you know, can the highway ramps and Highway 99 like accommodate the traffic from this new development? That whole process is going to change based on whether you're in the town center or not. So it could potentially be more feasible for development to occur. You know, the types of amenities and development that you'll want in Gladstone will have like fewer hoops to jump through to get approval if you're in the town center. So you know, where you want that to be is your decision, but it's just important to know that fact. And I'm happy to talk more with staff and other folks offline about how that works and the details about it. But that's a important little piece of the rules, the climate friendly and equitable communities rules. So thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay. I think we have heard from everybody. I'm just scrolling through participants to make sure. Anise, do you have anything to add right now for process of this? Okay. We heard from everybody and just, you know, we had 3 folks who said 1 seems better than 2 if I have to choose one, and 3 folks said 2 seems better than 1, and everybody else was either abstaining or didn't have a opinion between the 2. So it's pretty split, Anise.
Yeah, and I think that's okay. You know, I think what we're going to do is we're going to bring all of these comments back to the City Council and Planning Commission. So they will hear all of these perspectives, and you know, it's for them to consider those thoughts.
Okay, great. That was really a good way to queue up our next steps. So right now we have it set that if we did come out of this meeting with a preferred boundary alternative, we would be re-engaging with Echo Northwest to finalize an anti-displacement strategy for the preferred boundary. But I think what's going to need to happen instead is that we take all of this information to the City Council and Planning Commission to decide on a preferred boundary that we would then engage Echo Northwest to talk about those anti-displacement strategies. And then we'll be looking at those draft implementation measures, both development code / comp plan and administrative that we've spoken about here. And, you know, appreciate the information about project management jumpstart guide from the state that will definitely pull through so that the city can consider that as part of its strategy as well. And then the idea that we will be at the Planning Commission and City Council going through public hearings in the spring excuse me, so that we can stay on track to finalize adoption of the town center by June 30th of 2025. And then just an update too, for those of you who aren't on City Council or Planning Commission, we did just this last month approve the parking regulations that go along with the climate friendly and equitable communities requirements. So the last piece to that, which is happening at council on November 12th, is we are going to talk about a local tax for a commercial parking lot. So I think maybe, I can't remember if it was Lisa, I think, that said, what if we had a commercial parking lot downtown? If we did have a privately owned commercial parking lot in Gladstone, we would have a local tax on that as part of our climate friendly strategy. So we're working on that with council, and then that'll close out the parking side of our new legislation for that. And then we will continue this town center project into next spring. Any questions about that or thoughts?
I have a question.
Yes.
Hey, so okay, go back to this tax thing on the parking lot. So is this a tax paid by the private owner of the parking lot to the city?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Why?
We have to choose implementation measures for parking strategy as part of CFAC, and this was the choice made by the city council in determining which. So you had all these options, right? You could either say we're not going to mandate any parking at all in our whole city, or we're going to mandate parking, but we have to choose certain measures that we implement. And the city council and planning commission decided that they wanted to maintain the ability to require parking in certain areas of town. So especially when we're seeing conversion of single household developments over to middle housing, triplexes, quadplexes, particularly in the eastern part of the city, maintaining the ability to require off-street parking for those developments. But in exchange, the city had to choose some strategies to implement. So they chose to implement a commercial parking lot tax. And then also, when a commercial business comes in and provides a parking lot, we're unbundling that so they can lease those parking spaces separate from their business. So those were the two that were chosen off a menu of maybe 15 choices the city had.
So it sounds like at the end of the day, it's just forcing everybody down a route that's penalizing parking spots, no matter which method you choose. Like in some way, you're forcing people into the inconvenience of not driving.
Well, I think the other way to look at it is you're making more land available for other uses, and basically saying that the amount that it costs to provide a space to park a car is useful and needed land for other opportunities, for employment, for housing, and so just trying to balance those needs.
The needs are all, this is what we keep going back to. And I'm sorry to bring it up again, but the needs are already currently not met. I do not understand why we keep going back to this no parking thing. And yet when we do have an option of how to provide parking, we're penalizing the person for it. This is all so asinine. I'm sorry, but this is ridiculous. And whether the city council has chosen it or not, like, one, we can choose to choose things, and we're frustrated by it. And this conversation just keeps getting led down this forced path. And I think I'm not the only one getting frustrated here, but I have to say that. I'm sorry for any aggression in that, but this is counterintuitive to what the actual needs of the current residents are. It's not helping to expand us as a current living town. It's just forcing it into what these other people who clearly don't even live here think we should be. And I think at some point we need to be able to stand up and say, hey, this is a bit too much. So I don't know where we are at that point of being able to even say that, but everything that we have gone over in these 3 meetings terrifies me as a homeowner and a fresh business owner, and makes me really have questions about what the future of this town is going to be like.
Thanks, Bryce. With that, if anyone else has final comments, we can certainly take them. I think we have 20 more minutes scheduled for this call, but no need to keep people on. This is all we had for you for today. We had good discussion, got lots of good feedback. Parking is one of the biggest issues that's discussed in all communities, so it's definitely something that's in everybody's plans that are being discussed, but there are some limitations that we have before us because we are in the metro area. So, but we really appreciate everybody's time. We will make sure that we get this information back to the City Council and Planning Commissions so that we can move forward and finish out this project on the schedule so that we're able to fulfill our duties under the grant, since this project is fully funded by the state to get this completed for the city of Gladstone. Anais, anything to wrap up with?
No, I would just say once again, thanks for sharing your concerns and your comments. And yeah, we'll emphasize all of these at the next City Council and Planning Commission hearing. This is the last SAC meeting, so we will follow up when this work goes to City Council and Planning Commission, so you are able to listen in on the work session and or attend the hearing when that comes up. And we'll make sure that you all know about those opportunities. Those are also additional great opportunities to show up and share your thoughts and your comments as well, beyond what we also report to them. So yeah, we will keep you all up to speed on what happens next, and those communications will be via email. So just continue being on standby for that, and we will be communicating all the way through.
Okay, thank you everyone. Really appreciate it. We'll see you around town. Take
Thank
care.
you guys. Have a
Thank
nice
you,
day,
everybody.
everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.